And Chair Kinney, we're ready to go.
Thank you, Dina. Good morning, Wasaga Beach. Good morning, Mayor Bifulci. Good morning, Deputy Mayor Bray. Good morning, all council. Good morning, all staff. It is my pleasure today to call to order this Wasaga Beach Coordinated Committee for Thursday, January 13, 2022. A brand new year and hopefully a good year. Disclosure of preliminary interest, always a tough word to say, but if you do find yourself that you have one throughout this meeting, please identify it to the chair at the time. Community service section 3.1, deputation, presentation, petitions, and public meetings. We do have two, but they seem to fall in the development services section. And as a result, it'll be my pleasure to turn the chair over to Councillor Foster to host and share these two presentations. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm back to that. I did not get the script for this that I'm aware of. So perhaps if we could get that sent to my email, that
They're just delegations, Councillor Foster.
Oh, are they just delegations?
Yeah,
oh,
they're
okay.
delegations.
Sorry, I got all excited on the public meeting. In that case, thank you. We'll go to the first one, which is Board the Boat B&B. And we have Ms. Kathy Lane, read the bed and breakfast operations, zoning and licensing review. I won't read the full thing at this point. We'll wait until after the presentation, but I'll turn the floor over to Ms. Lane, please. Go ahead.
Great, thank you very much. I'd like to thank the town councillors, the deputy mayor, and the mayor for the opportunity to express my concerns regarding the urgent situation with the bed and breakfasts in Wasaga Beach. My name is Kathy Lane. I've been in the hospitality industry for over 25 years, and I've worked extensively with Fortune 500 industries, major resorts, sports franchises, and many celebrities. In the past 4 years, I've owned and operated one of the top licensed bed and breakfasts in Wasaga Beach. I really sincerely believe in this community and have enjoyed the support of the vast majority of my neighbors. I have had over 500 outstanding reviews from guests who have come to this area and have in turn supported local shops, restaurants, tradespeople, and businesses. My bed and breakfast operates all year round and provides economic stability to myself and to others throughout the year. I strongly believe that small business and tourists are the backbone of this town, and believe that we are reaching a crisis point for the survival of bed and breakfast, facing competition from other types of tourist accommodations, and of course from this pandemic. There is an urgent need for guidance as to how these businesses can adapt and to survive. As directed by the health officials and industry standard documentation, it is no longer safe to share spaces or to be in close proximity to other guests. For small operators like myself, it is imperative from a competition and safety view that we're able to provide separate cooking facilities for our guests so that they can prepare their own food, and owners are able to keep themselves and members of their families safe by having absolutely no contact. Allowing cooking facilities in studios provides guests with options. There are health concerns, cultural convenience, and costs that dictate the traveling public needs and these amenities. And thus it's very important that we provide them. It has become far safer to include these amenities as safety features in appliances and alarm systems have had huge recent advancements. It is no longer considered dangerous to have a large appliance in a kitchen facility or in one house. And in fact, it is encouraged by governments for various reasons. It is considered actually a much greater health hazard due to COVID and its variants not to have separate facilities for the traveling guests. And it looks like this trend is not going to change anytime soon. It is imperative, as options to eat are becoming more and more limited due to COVID closures, that guests have a safe place to eat in their accommodations, especially during the winter. I ask that council allow separate kitchen facilities in order for us to be separated from our guests and still be able to remain in business. Council has the ability to be quick and agile to respond to the needs of other businesses. An example of this would be the restaurants that have been allowed to operate in parking lots. 2 years ago, this would have been prohibitive and resulted in fines. Today, it is encouraged and supported. As B&B operators, we ask for the same sort of support. We are ineligible for almost all grants and need to be able to stay in business. It is imperative that council understands that bylaw and fire officials have completed an inspection and have granted licenses to businesses such as mine over a number of years, which I might add have already had cooking facilities. The optics of canceling these licenses of businesses that have recently passed inspections over a number of years would not be good. As an operator, I relied on the accuracy of these inspections and have invested a significant amount of money upgrading my facilities with new appliances and custom cabinetry. Requiring me to remove the approved and licensed facilities represents a significant financial burden. I would also suggest that all B&B licenses would then require to be reviewed, and it would become clear that any number of licenses have then been issued erroneously. The master plan is under review. This means that neighbors such as mine, or neighborhoods such as mine, are very likely to be rezoned. I am in an area that has 4 permanent full-time residents on my block. The rest consist of seasonal rentals or part-time residents. The full and part-time residents often have multiple inhabitable buildings on one lot. I'm surrounded by 2 trailer parks and the lake. This type of neighborhood would likely be reviewed, and the likelihood that it will be rezoned is good. This means allowing a broader scope in a tourist accommodation will be allowed. By deferring the decision to have kitchen facilities for another year allows, again, us to keep our guests safe, and saves us from redoing expensive leaseholds in a time of crisis. Again, it allows the town to stand behind its decisions. The definition of kitchen facilities means different things to different owners. Zoning recently defined kitchen facilities as anything except a kettle and a coffee maker to be not allowed. This means we cannot have toaster ovens, microwaves, small appliances, hot plates, crock pots, or anything, any small or large appliance. As all of our physical properties are different, some of us have some of these appliances or all of them available to our guests. By making a sweeping decision to disallow kitchen facilities means these small appliances can easily hide during inspection and slip under the radar. For others like myself, who have put a great deal of time and effort and expense to make sure our guests can prepare a meal safely, it becomes more difficult. For council to stand behind the issued license and allow meals to be prepared allows all of us to remain on equal footing. And I've consulted with Danny Rogers in building, Doug Heron in planning, Craig Williams, the deputy fire marshal, and Caitlin Monsma in economic development for their input, and believe they have a very good understanding of the building, the safety, the business, the neighborhood, and the financial predicament of this business. It is my understanding that the nature of the neighborhood and the safety of the operation will not change if a stove is in place. I would propose that a site-specific amendment be given to this property and suggest it be used as a case study to understand how best to move forward. If council decides that this solution is not appropriate, I would respectfully request that every bed and breakfast be inspected and held to the same rigorous standards that I am subject to. I believe that we have solutions that could work for all of us. One would be to stand behind the licenses and the inspected setup to remain, grandfather us by allowing legal non-conforming licenses to be issued, This allows, again, the town to stand behind its departments and to allow struggling small businesses to stay alive. The second would be to review all of us that have come forward to work with the town and grant suitable applicants a site-specific amendment, which again gives the optics of a unified town, encourages safe business, and protects the tourist industry. I'd like to thank councillors and everybody, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation and bringing your concerns to us. There's a lot of ways that COVID is impacting our community at all levels. So it's always good to kind of hear personal stories and kind of how it impacts businesses that we may not be thinking of quite as much. So we're going to be referring this back to staff for further review, but I will open it up if anyone has any comment right at this moment. I did. Okay, seeing three now. We'll start with Deputy Mayor Bray, go to Councillor Belanger, and then Councillor Wells in that order, please.
Okay.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank
Hello,
you.
how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Nice to see you here and good to hear you're still standing. It's certainly been a tough couple of years for most businesses.
Yes.
Thank you for your presentation. Not only did you bring your problem, you brought a good understanding of the current system that we're working within, as well as some suggestions for different things that might work for you and for others. So I appreciate the thoroughness of your presentation and hope staff can look at this fairly quickly. So thank you
so much. I appreciate that.
Councillor Belanger.
Thank you, Chair Foster. Yes, in your presentation, you didn't show any of the photos of your operation, but I did see them online, and I would say that it would certainly, in my mind, be one of the highest quality establishments that we have in town. So,
thank you. I appreciate
and I agree. These are very challenging times, and I think we do need to think outside the box. I have touched base with a few about it already, and certainly I look forward to hearing staff's recommendations. But the only other thing, and to remind council, is that the challenge is not just with bed and breakfast. Like, we have a lot of challenges re Airbnb, many of which are still unlicensed, and I think the more we can do to get everyone in the accommodation business to be on a level playing field, the better, in my mind. So thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Chair Foster. I guess first thing I'm going to say is that I may have been remiss in catching something going through, but I was not aware that I can recall of this whole issue of reviewing the bed and breakfast and the issue of the kitchen. So this came as a surprise to me. It's not something that was on my radar previously. So I'm not sure when we started this review and when we started to enforce this policy. But certainly I didn't know about it at the time. Having said that, I think we're looking at a situation that we're kind of in a double bind. We know that secondary residences have been mandated by the province, and so anyone wishing to create a secondary residence in their home or in an adjacent building can do so. And of course, full kitchen facilities are part of creating a second residence. And they're subject to inspection, just as Kathy has indicated. So I'm really struggling to understand why we're taking a different approach between secondary residences and a bed and breakfast circumstance. The logic has escaped me at this point as to why we would treat them totally differently. Anyway, those are my comments.
Great.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm sure that staff will address that when they come back with a report on this. I saw Councillor Kinney, please.
Thank you, Chair Foster, and thank you so much, Kathy, for your presentation. From my point of view, it was extremely informative, and what I really pulled out of it was a need in our community to help, and your solutions and thought processes I do like. And as Chair Foster did say, it's going to be going back to staff, and I'm looking forward to a very positive turnout for you. But again, Kathy, thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
All right, Councillor Belanger.
Yes, thank you, Chair Foster. I just have a question, and that would be, my understanding is that the kitchen appliances have been inspected and have been deemed to be installed properly. In the meantime, while this is being referred back to staff and coming forward, I am hopeful that you're able to operate your business on an ongoing basis in the interim. So I would just like that clarification. I wouldn't like to see a business shut down while we're waiting for this to come back to council.
Okay, Kathy, are you able to operate at this moment?
Right now, I have another inspection due on January the 22nd. So
Okay.
I need to have a decision, well, obviously well before that date, because if I have to do retrofitting, I would have to start almost immediately to do that. So we are under a time restraint here. Either that, or we ask for to make that deadline a little bit longer so that I can react and that you have time to react.
All right. Well, we'll get staff to reply to council in a timely manner on that and let us know how they're going to move ahead. Bearing that, knowing that staff will be looking at this.
Councillor Foster, I believe
yes.
our CIO wanted to speak, as well as Doug.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I can't see everyone on the screen. So we'll start with our CIO, Mr. Redbunker.
Thank you, Chair Foster. I just wanted to point out that Doug Heron had indicated that he wished to speak, so I'll let him go first. Thank you.
Go ahead, Doug.
You're muted, Doug.
It's better when you're not muted.
Sounds like I wanted to add some information and maybe respond to some of the questions that have been arisen from the council members. The issue, of course, is one of land use compliance. A bed and breakfast is currently a permitted use at the property. The property is zoned R1 for residential. By installing cooking facilities in each of the rooms, the use changes to a bed and breakfast into a hotel or a motel or a lodge, which of course are not permitted in the official plan or zoning bylaw. So that's the crux of the issue that we're dealing with. Other than how Ms. Lane has explained the difficulties that her business and other businesses are experiencing because of COVID and safety triggers through COVID. So there has been a lot of work with Ms. Lane on this. With regard to the second unit, both bylaw and planning have met with Ms. Lane, and we're looking at it from a comprehensive approach. So the zone is R1. The province does allow a second unit as of right. So we're taking that into account and trying to allow as much lenience as we can based on the current zoning permissions. And the issue with the review of the cooking facilities, Ms. Lane has been very straightforward and honest with staff all the way through our interactions with her. And she pointed out to staff that she was getting different interpretations from different departments on what constitutes a cooking facility. So staff took that to heart, and we assembled the various departments, fire, building, planning, bylaw, and had an internal review so that we all understand what truly constitutes a cooking facility. So in answer to Councillor Wells's question, that's how that came about, and it wasn't something that was really brought before council for review. It was more of a consistency internal review. And finally, In terms of reporting back, we don't actually have an active file other than a bylaw non-compliance file on this. However, in our discussions with Ms. Lane, she's very creative on the business side of things. So we've brought her, we've connected her with Caitlin Monsma, our EDO, but also planning has advised her that we do have the official plan update forthcoming. And as part of the official plan update, we are looking at the application, or how do we apply and regulate Airbnb, so short-term accommodation within the town of Wasaga Beach. We are a tourist town. It is a thing, but it is something that we would want to control. So the only true report back tool that we have would be through the official plan update, which is forthcoming. I mean, we could certainly provide an information report to committee as a follow-up to try to get into a little more depth on this. Certainly, Ms. Lane is incredibly creative in her product, and that's evident through the feedback that she's getting from her clients, and just through the creativity of she's put into her product. So that's why we brought her to the attention of Caitlin, to make sure that somehow, some way, we can find a method to help her out.
Thank you. And we're not going to have the full debate on this or discussion on this, but I do think that, you know, the issue's been raised and it does deserve, obviously, attention. And since we've got it, I'd like to hear kind of feedback on where it goes and how we can address it creatively ourselves to match the creativity of Ms. Lane. All right. That being said, thank you very much again, Kathy, for your presentation. As was noted many times, it was thorough and not just a problem, but offered solutions as well. So thank you for that. I'll just read this and we'll move on at this point. But the Community Service Section of Coordinated Committee received the presentation from Ms. Kathy Lane for information, and further that it be referred back to staff for further review. I'll get a mover and seconder, please. Your Worship and Councillor Kinney, all those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Kathy. And we'll move on to the next. And I will save the clerk from having to say, could you just please turn your video off? Thank you, Kathy. Okay. Next, we're going from Kathy to Kathleen. And this is Kathleen Caswell, who will be representing the Wasaga Beach Climate Action Team. She's in to present to committee actions and recommendations for mitigation and adaptation to climate change. So I see you're on there, Kathleen. I will turn the floor over to you then. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, and good morning to the Madam Mayor and Deputy Mayor and the councillors, and Happy New Year. And thanks for the opportunity to speak to you today. So I have lived in Wasaga Beach for 15 years in the West End, and I'm quite close to the shoreline. Unfortunately, I purchased a house on a lot which is lower than my neighbor's lots. So every spring there is a fair amount of water in the back of the lot, but I planted cedar trees and they're very happy. So I do expect a bit of water every spring. However, on September 23rd that just passed, there was more water in my backyard than I have ever seen. It crept right up to my deck, and it wasn't even spring, and it was scary. It was from two reasons, I believe. There was an extraordinary amount of rainfall in a short period of time, and I noticed this summer that my backyard neighbor had decided to replace most of his lawn in the back with cement. And as you know, these surfaces are impermeable and water has to go somewhere. So my backyard was a minor Abbotsford. And I'm not the only one. When I walk around my neighborhood, I hear the sump pumps go off frequently, and I see the roads under construction, installing larger and larger drainage pipes. And I fear the day where the sump pumps won't be able to keep up and the drainage pipes won't be big enough, and our insurance companies may no longer insure us. There are three human emotions that inspire action: fear, pride, and hope. I just described fear. The second one being pride. We are proud that we live in a community that does the right things. We are proud that we have earned the Blue Flag certification for high environmental standards. We are proud that we have a beautiful beach and a large amount of forest and parks, and that the town works so hard to provide us with amenities. So that's pride. And finally, hope. We all hope for a better tomorrow where we live in harmony with our nature, with our natural environment. And we here in Wasaga Beach, along with the global community, will overcome this existential challenge of our time, climate change. So we're motivated to speak to you today because of fear and pride and hope. Now, we're very thankful for 5 actions that have taken place lately. Number 1, all the comments made at the budget meeting in December regarding what's being done already for climate change. Number 2, for the assignment of the Director of Building to coordinate and report on all the town actions, which is in the agenda for today. And number 3, for the recommendations to hire an energy consultant to prepare an energy management plan. And for the commitment from the mayor to meet with us this month. And the latest update of the council's 4-year priorities, which does have some actions in there regarding climate change. We are thankful for all those actions. Tell me if you can see my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you. So we are thankful for all those actions, and our goal today is twofold. Sorry. Gotta go over there. We want to introduce ourselves, and we want to determine how we can work together. So who are we? We were founded shortly after the council passed the declaration of the climate emergency in May of 2021. And our mission is to work together with the council and staff and the community. Why did we form? Well, there's a report from the Simcoe-Muskoka District Health Unit called A Changing Climate, and it documents the very likely health impacts right here in Simcoe-Muskoka of our ever worsening climate. And as we know, health impacts are quickly followed by economic impacts, as this pandemic has shown us. And we don't want that to happen. None of us do. And that is why we formed the team. We have a presence on all the social media platforms. And we are becoming well known in the community. We are a small leadership group of 10 people, but we have now reached out to a lot of the community and have a lot of interest. We've been published in a few local and county-wide publications and websites. We were interviewed on 95.1 the radio last week, and we are on the front page of the Wasaga Sun today. Each of you received a 9-page letter last month with our thoughts about climate change and our recommendations. We attend here today asking for your feedback on that letter and approval regarding the 5 recommendations in the letter. Number 1, create a task force made up of council and staff and community members to bring ideas forward to address climate change. Number 2, create a plan. Number 3, hire a specialist. Many municipalities have already done that. Collingwood, Barrie, Orillia, Grey County, Simcoe County, Grey Highlands, to name a few. And we could also even consider a shared resource, like what they did by forming the Severn Sound Environmental Association, which is made up of 8 municipalities. Number 4, bring awareness to the community. As Danny Rogers' report says, it has become clear that there is a need to better communicate the town's efforts regarding mitigation and adaptation to climate change. And we can use our current communication channels, but there are many other ideas. There is a program to help homeowners convert to green energy. We can organize an energy expo to exhibit environmental solutions. We could create a demonstration site right here in town, perhaps the Wasaga Beach Youth Center. And number 5, this is possibly the largest building ever built by our municipality. Is it as green as possible? What will it cost to retrofit if it's mandated to make it green later? So in summary, we are motivated by fear of climate change and severe weather, by pride in our community, and by hope in the possibility of working together. Our ask today is, how can we work together with you? Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And I don't think there's going to be a full answer today in how we can work together, but I do think, as you mentioned in that report later on, Danny has outlined some of the steps to start. Before I open it up, I see a few people putting up signs right now, but I will mention that, this is something that certainly has been near and dear to my heart since 2003, when I got motivated to go on to council due to an environmental, getting rid of all the trees at the Walmart place there in Stonebridge. That was the starter. But I will open it up right now to Her Worship, then Councillor Kinney, and I think that's it for now, but we'll see who comes on later. Go ahead, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Kathleen, for your presentation. As you mentioned, I look forward to meeting with you at some point over the next couple of weeks. And in discussions with the CAO, I've asked that appropriate staff attend as well, so that we can have that fulsome discussion and see where things go. And I look forward to Danny's report, additional report coming forward in February. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Kinney, and then Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Chair Foster. Kathleen, great report. Thank you so much for bringing it again to council. It's an issue that, like Councillor Foster, I feel passionate about. We only have one world. We gotta have to look after it. Again, thank you, and I'm looking forward to the reports that we could be getting back from Danny. Heaven's sakes, well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Watson, please, and then Councillor Belanger after Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Kathleen, thank you for your presentation about this important subject. I know you and your team have been working hard since you formed the group, and even before that, this past summer, I enjoyed joining you and members of the Wasaga Beach Rotary Club and Georgian Bay Forever Group and doing our Monday morning beach cleanups, where we met at Beach Area 3 and spread out from there east and west to do beach cleanup. I also listened to your interview on the Peak 95 on the Talk of the Town program. And I won't repeat some of it, but you mentioned in the interview that our CAO, Mr. Vadabon-Kur, provided you and your group a multi-page response to your questions earlier that you posed. I was impressed with the many initiatives that the town is underway already, and later in the meeting we'll have a report, as you mentioned, from our chief building official, Danny Rogers, which shows the report illustrates the collective effort of our many departments and individuals who work with community organizations and other levels of government to address climate change. One question I have is, I'm curious to know if your team has been in contact with Ontario Parks, as I have not seen that mentioned in your presentation or your newsletter to date. Wasaga Beach is somewhat unique in having a provincial park within its borders, and the provincial park is our largest landowner with approximately 4,600 acres under their stewardship. So they're an important player in any climate initiative. They've always been billed as our partner in Wasaga Beach, and I think if you haven't, I think you need to address themselves. I know in the interview on the radio station you mentioned about forest fires and that, and you know, we have a huge tree cover in Wasaga Beach, and a lot of it's to do with the fact that we have protected acreages throughout town, 4,600 of them in fact. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. I appreciate that referral to the Ontario Parks, because no, I have not been in touch with them. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, good. Councillor Belanger, you were next, please.
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation, Kathleen. I too have read a number of your articles. You know, listened to your interview on the radio, read your 9-page letter, and the level of professionalism and preparation and research you've done is impressive. And I would say that when we consider working together, when we have 10 individuals from the community that are very passionate, are willing to do a lot of research and share that with the town, that's kind of a resource at very reasonable cost that can be a benefit. The only other thing I would say is I know Kathleen also. So I'm fortunate enough to have Kathleen as my accountant, and she has an accounting background and has looked at a lot of things from the perspective of not just a cost to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but actually to look at the economic benefit and the things that we can do that can give us a very quick return on investment. And I think that's important because as we've just gone through a budgetary process, the budgets are always challenging, but I think there is a lot of opportunity for us to both be great stewards of the environment and also be very conscious of both our cost to the municipality, but the benefits to our economy. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you for that, Councillor. Again, I think I'll wrap this up. So I'll thank you, Kathleen, for your bringing the presentation and all the information. I will then read the resolution here that Community Service Section of Coordinated Committee received the presentation from Mrs. Kathleen Caswell for information. Mover and seconder, please. Moving, Councillor Kinney. Seconding, Councillor Watson. All those in favor, please. And that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. And stick around for later in the meeting. We have a very exciting report you'll love. Thanks. Okay, I will now kick the chair.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. And you cut out with, you haven't quite kicked the chair to me, but I'll take it anyway. And I thank Kathleen and Kathy for their presentations. Now we'll move on to unfinished business. We have none in community services. Other agency report, we have one, our fire department report. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to the greatest fire chief in Canada, Chief McWilliams. Please go ahead.
And thank you again, Chair Kinney, and good morning, Your Worship, members of council. In the month of December, the fire department responded to 149 calls for service, bringing our 2021 total to 1,852 calls. So I'm going to come back to our response statistics after I talk about a couple of notable occurrences. There were 2 structure fires noted in the report for December. The first occurred on the 14th in the west end of town, and this fire was deliberately set. This involved an individual with some mental health issues and had a well-known history to the OPP. The fire was contained to a bedroom. Damage was minimal and there were no injuries. The second fire occurred just after 8 a.m. Christmas Eve day. That was on River Road West, just east of Zoo Park Road. We did have River Road West closed for a portion of time. We did arrive to a fully involved structure fire. It was a cottage-like structure with 2 exposure buildings nearby. We were able to quickly confirm that the single occupant was out of the cottage and was not injured. Fire was extinguished with no damage to the adjacent structures. The ignition source for the fire was determined to be the cooking appliance, which was being used to heat the home. So just going back to talk about our stats a little bit. So over the last 15 years, we have climbed in call volume significantly. We do have a line graph here. So just to give you an idea, in 2007, our call volume was 427 for the year. And I just mentioned that for 2021, it was 1,852. Now, to be fair, in 2007, at the end of that year was when we entered into the tiered response agreement. So it only captures a few months. So if you go to 2008, where we were operating at the same level of service that we're operating now, we had 832 calls. So we've increased by a little over 1,000 calls in that time frame. So there's 2 factors. Obviously, the town's growing. We have a larger population. We have more businesses, so that's expected. Now, the big jump from from last year to this year of 350 calls is, again, population related, but it's also definitely related to the pandemic. We have more people at home, which, you know, you've got more people requiring medical assistance, more people having kitchen fires because they're cooking more. So it is definitely an impact of the pandemic. The reason that the calls were not as high in 2020, which was a pandemic year as well, is, well, the first few months weren't a pandemic, and then we did reduce our medical response for a period of time in 2020. So there's a little bit of a blip there where that 2020 year should be very similar to 2021, but those two factors kept that number down. So anyway, we're clearly very busy. We've been able to maintain our full services. We also have a pie chart that shows the percentages of, it's same as what's in our regular monthly report. There's one for the year. We're still running at 70% medical calls. So everything has gone up. It's not just directly related to medicals. We've been running 70% for medical calls all along. So that number really hasn't changed. So just overall, all the types of calls that we do is up. So fires, for example, is 5%, all the different types of fires, and that's still maintaining that percentage. So just we're a growing town, and our call volume is going up. And the only other thing I wanted to mention is tomorrow's an exciting day for us. Our new aerial platform will be delivered sometime in the morning. We're excited about that. And then next Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday morning, they actually fly someone in from Pierce to deliver the training on this new truck. So by Wednesday afternoon, it will be in service, and we'll be taking our old aerial out of service at that time. And that's my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chief, and a very informative one. And I think everyone on council is looking forward to that delivery. Right now, I'm going to turn it over to council if there's any questions of our chief. Well, seeing none, because you did a fantastic report, Chief. Thank you so much. I will read the motion. Resolved that the Community Service Section of Coordinated Committee received the December 2021 Fire Department report for information. May I have a mover and seconder? Councillor Foster, Councillor Wells, and I'll call all in favor. That moves unanimously 7-0. Thank you again, Chief. Now we're going to move into the consent agenda. At this time, council, I'm not seeing anything pulled. And as a result, unless I see something now, I'm going to read the agenda and we can move forward. Not see anything. Oh, there we go. Please, Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you. It was just a comment on item 3.5.1, the strategic plan for the library. And I read through it. It's big, it's robust. There's a ton of information in there. The only thing didn't jump out at me was internal partnerships, because I see moving forward that there should be a real connection between our not parks and facilities, our recreation, I guess, our youth center, our senior center, and our library, because I think they're all offering sometimes similar services, and I think we might get a bigger bang for our buck if there's a real commitment to work together. So I'm just not sure if it was in there and I didn't see it. It might be a question for Councillor Foster, or just a comment for consideration.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and please, Councillor Foster.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, through you to the Deputy Mayor. Well, I can't put my finger on it right away here. Certainly the board has discussed that at length, the cooperation piece. So I'll make sure that the library board gets it, and somewhere in here, I know it is in there. It was discussed. So I will take it back to the board, and I'll bring back a report to, or a memo to the Deputy Mayor or to council, just to let them know that it's covered. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor and Councillor Foster. Deputy Mayor, I saw your hand up. Did you want to No? Okay, good. Just wanted to cover everything before we move forward. That being said, I'll read the motion. Resolve that the Community Service Section and Coordinating Committee hereby receive the January 13th, 2022 consent agenda 3.4 through 3.6 and all the recommendations contained therein be adopted, excluding agenda items pulled, there has been none, from the motion and voted on separately. Could I have a mover and seconder, please? Deputy Mayor Bray and Councillor Watson. All in favor? Thank you. That moves unanimously 7-0. Moving down, no other matters. And as a result of that, I will turn over the chair to Councillor Watson at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kinney. We're now moving into the Public Works section of the agenda. Today we have no deputations, presentations, petitions, or public meetings. We have one item still on unfinished business. We have no other agency reports. We now move into the consent agenda, and at this point I don't see anything pulled from the agenda, so I will read the motion. All items listed below will be approved by one resolution. There will be no separate. Oh, I'm sorry. Resolve that the Public Works Section of Coordinating Committee hereby receives the January 13th, 2022 consent agenda items 4.4 through to 4.6, and that all the recommendations contained therein be adopted, excluding agenda items pulled from the motion and voted on separately. May I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Belanger, and a seconder, Councillor Wells. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. And that is it for Public Works. Is there a need to take a 5-minute break at all at this point, or continue on? I'm seeing no requests, so we will move on to Development Services. Thanks.
Thank you, George. I'll do the Development Services section of the committee here. There is no, well, we had the deputations, unfinished business. There's a few items here. There's no other agency reports at the moment. Under the consent agenda, I see one item pulled, 5.5.1, and I know that Councillor Watson wanted to do a comment, I believe, on 5.5.3. So before I get into the, I'll let you do your comment first, and then we'll do the rest of the consent agenda. George, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. I think actually I had just wanted to do a comment on 5.5.1 and 0.3. So if somebody pulled 5.5.1, maybe they can speak first. I was just going to make a comment.
Okay. Yeah, I actually pulled it, but also did staff. So we'll let them go first because it's a good news story. We'll let them have the thunder for a change. All right. Notwithstanding item 5.5.1, which has been pulled, we'll do the consent agenda. Is resolved that Development Services section of the Coordinated Committee hereby receives the January 13th, 2022 consent agenda items 5.4 through 5.6, and that all recommendations contained therein be adopted, excluding agenda items pulled from the motion and voted on separately, that being 5.5.1, and as you said, George, there'll be some comment on 5.5.3. Mover, please. Councillor Belanger and Councillor Kinney. Seconding. All those in favor, please. That's carried unanimously. So we will go to 5.5.1. Normally I would be saying this is record breaking, but I'll let Danny do. I think Danny is going to speak to that. So Mr. Rogers, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to highlight some of the numbers for you, and it's my pleasure to do so. You'll have noted that in our October reporting, we identified some performance indicators that we thought, gave a good indication of where the town stood in terms of the development numbers we were seeing last year, and actually for a few years now. And So we identified 5 areas of interest, that being the total number of permits issued, the total number of dwelling units created, the total value of residential construction, the total value of non-residential construction, as well as those two values combined. So I'm really happy to be able to tell you today that last year we set records in all 5 of those areas. And actually, and I'll go through the numbers in the years, but one of the things that I think that's important to point out is that, you know, in the past, many of the notable years were set in individual years. And this year, in 1 year, we eclipsed all of those numbers in the same year. So I'll just go through them point by point. The year in which the most building permits was issued was 2004, when 870 building permits were issued. At the end of December in 2021, we actually got to 871 building permits. So we only did beat that record by 1 permit, but we did beat it. The total number of residential dwelling units created, our record year was also 2004, when 493 dwelling units were created. In 2021, 530 dwelling units were created. So you can see that we exceeded our best year by quite a bit. The highest residential construction value ever recorded in the town was just over $106 million in 2017. Last year, we surpassed that number by more than $78 million, setting a record for residential construction value of $184,375. So it was really a stellar year in that regard. Total value for non-residential construction, the record was set in 2019, when we issued $17,840,000 in non-residential construction. We surpassed that number last year by over $70 million, with a total non-residential construction value of $88,293,000. And lastly, our total construction value, the previous record was set in 2019, when a total value of $123,485,000 was our record. And last year, our number finished the year at $272,669,000, exceeding our best year by almost $150 million. And if I could, I'd just like to point out that, you know, the issuance of a building permit is the result, you know, of a lot of work that happens before the building department gets involved in earnest. You know, certainly the work done by our planning department and our engineering department, with contributions from a number of agencies that we work with on a regular basis. The work is unending, and it really sets the table for us. And I always like to also point out, and you know, we heard the chief talking about the increase in calls for service in our fire department, and you know, the result of the growth that we're experiencing. And I always think of the issuance of a permit being similar to throwing a pebble in a calm pond of water. It sets off a ripple effect that you know, goes a long way. So certainly the workflows that happen as a result of the issuance of a permit touch every single department within our organization. And I think for us to be able to handle a year like last year in the manner that we did in the middle of a pandemic really just speaks to the dedication and the professionalism of our staff across the board. So, you know, as the chief building official and as the guy that gets to sit before you today and tout these numbers, I do so with a great deal of gratitude for the efforts put forth by every other department. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Danny. And I just want to point out that you've now set the baseline for every year going forward. Without a doubt, it's been a record-setting year, and staff from as you mentioned, from every department have been involved with developers and the public in making this happen. So it's great work. And again, this is you know, the more residential, the more business, the more construction we have, it generates tax revenue, but it also generates amenities for people, and it makes this town, you know, more complete every time there's something, you know, something else goes in. It expands it. So I will open that up for some comment. Maybe start. I think Councillor Watson, you wanted to make a comment on that. So if you'd like to start.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Not too much for me to say. Danny has gone over his report, very, very impressive. And it was shown earlier in the economic development report, I think from a year and a half ago, that the construction industry in Wasaga Beach is the #1 driver of employment and dollars. And by this growth that we're having, numbers mean everything. The commercial, the businesses, the large chains, they look at benchmarks. When you hit 20,000, when you hit 25,000 in population, that triggers a lot of commercial activity, which will again expand our tax base, and that is happening in 5.5.3. I will touch on that also. But every building permit, as Danny says, generates taxes, and it's shown through the Canadian Real Estate Association that when someone moves into a new house, tens of thousands of dollars are generated from the people coming in that pave the driveways, to put the bigger deck on, to do the window coverings, to do the light fixtures, all these extra things that happen when people move into our community. So congratulations. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Belanger, I see your card. Oh, and Danny, before you start, Joe, Danny, did you want to respond to that first? And then
actually, thank you, Chair Foster. There was just 2 other items I just wanted to touch on quickly, and I can certainly wait to do that, or I can put it out there now.
No, we'll let Councillor Belanger go, and then you can deal with all the other items. So go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair Foster. Yes, I just wanted to mention for the public is if you go back to our budget process and look at the investment we've made in new staffing positions, when you look at the volume of work that's been created that does touch every department, I think it's fair that everyone would agree that the investment we made from a percentage is that every year with very limited staff increases, we're handling a lot more work as a municipality. Certainly, some of the technologies we've invested in have done that too, but we continue to be a very lean organization. And I think, sometimes when we see the numbers of the payroll investment, we forget about some of what Danny just told us and how that does have a ripple effect across all our departments. So thank you for your report, Danny.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Belanger. And Danny, you wanted to get back on some other items, so please do.
Thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, just 2 things I wanted to also point out. The building department, we've got a lot of new staff in this department, and I think it would have been really remiss of me not to point out just the great work of the department specifically. Everybody just gets on board, and we process a lot of work in this department, and as Councillor Belanger touched on, we've made a lot of process improvements, and so the work of the staff within the department is really something that I should point out, as well as our builders and developers. We've in order to manage this volume of development, it really demands that we increase our communication with them and really get in their kitchens and get involved in their business. And I'll just give you an example. When we're seeing the type of the numbers that we're seeing for dwelling units, it requires buy-in from our development community in terms of getting their plans to us very, very early on in the process, sharing with us their construction schedules, their closing dates, so that we can align our efforts to make sure that we keep them moving and make sure that they meet their deadlines. So it really is a two-way street in terms of communication, and I think it just would have been very remiss of me not to mention A, my staff, and B, the development community for really just partnering with us and being open to some of the crazy ideas we throw out there along the way.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a more efficient process. I should also point out, you mentioned that we were, the previous top growth was in 2004 for, I think it was permits issued. For those of us who are around, we will remember that at that time, Wasaga Beach was, I think, in the top 2 or 3 across Canada in the speed of growth. We had more growth, more money, more value this time. But again, it's something that's across our not only our town, but across Canada, really. But, so anyway, we're the benefactors of that. So good work. And if there's nothing else on that one, I will read that. Read 5.5.1, and that's that development service section of the coordinating committee receives the staff report, building department activity summary, December 2021 for information. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Watson. All those in favor? And that is approved unanimously and happily. Now, I believe that Councillor Watson, you wanted to just address 5.5.3, just comments. So go ahead, please.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Yeah, and it sort of goes with what we just talked about. I see Caitlin's economic development report, and the very last paragraph just states the writer is excited about the number of new businesses opening in town or existing businesses expanding, and expects further grand openings as the year progresses. And she names 4 businesses, A&W, the Paint Bar, CB Hydrate, and Claws by Christel, that have opened in the next while. And going back to my earlier point, as we grow, we're going to see that commercial base also grow with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was just a comment. We don't need to do anything on that. So that takes us to the end of development services. We can flip it over to general government, or we can take a 5-minute break if people would like. I see one request, so we will do it. We'll take, it is now, what time is it? 10:01. We'll come back, say at 10:10, please. Thank you.
And we're live, Deputy Mayor Bray.
Thank you very much. Welcome back. We are reconvening with the General Government Services section of Coordinated Committee on this crisp January day. Happy New Year. So we have a consent agenda. Deputations, presentations, petitions, and public meetings. We have none for general government. Unfinished business, there's nothing listed. There's no other agency reports. So we move into our consent agenda, of which 2 items have been pulled that I am aware of. That is item 6.5.5 and 6.6.3. If there are no others, I will read the motion. Resolved that the General Government Services section of Coordinated Committee hereby receive the January 13th, 2022 consent agenda, items 6.4 through to 6.6, and that recommendations contained therein be adopted, excluding agenda items pulled from the motion as they will be voted on separately. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Kinney, Mayor Bifulci, all in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you. So the first item to be pulled is item 6.5.5, the Director of Building and Development Standards, Chief Building Officials Report, dated January 13th, a sustainable future. And this was actually pulled by Mr. Rogers, and I wonder if he would like to join us and maybe make some comments. Are you there, Danny?
Yes, Deputy Mayor Bray, sorry. For some reason, I'm unable to turn on. Oh, there we go. I'm getting a notice now that I can turn on my video here.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I just wanted to provide a little perspective on the report. First off, point out that, although my name is on the report, there was certainly a lot of people that contributed to the content of the report. And there are more yet to contribute to the report. So, I think as we begin this conversation with the Wasaga Beach Climate Action Group, we thought it was important to sort of establish a baseline understanding of some of the things that we do as a town currently. Certainly, if you've been involved in municipal operations for the last 20 years, you would know that climate change has become a real tangible part of what we do every day. Anybody involved in the administration of any provincial regulation will know that mitigation and adaptation to climate change has really become a cornerstone of many of the regulations and many of the much of the design criteria, climatic design criteria that goes into everything from our linear infrastructure to vertical infrastructure. So it really was an effort to just try to demonstrate that, for those of us in roles such as mine and across the organization, it's very much a part of what we do every day. And there's a lot of really exciting things happening in the arena of climate change. A lot of the design criteria historically has been based on historic information, and the climate that we exist in today is that the design criteria is constantly changing because the province and other higher levels of government are moving toward more predictive models. So we see in our regulations we see constant changes coming down the pipe because last year's extreme rain event informed some changes, and then this year we may have an extreme wind event. So as these events happen, change gets sent down to us, and we're charged with A, understanding it, and then B, making sure that this new criteria is being adhered to. So we just really wanted to sort of establish that baseline in terms of if we're going to have a communication or a conversation about what we can do in the future, just as we need to understand what the goals of the Wasaga Beach Climate Action Team are, I think it's equally important that they understand, the operational pressures that are on us every day as we try to adapt to what really is a shifting landscape when it comes to climate change mitigation and adaptation. So the mayor pointed out earlier in her comments that I would be coming back before council in February with a report. I acknowledge that, not every town department that could have had input into this report had an opportunity to do that. So, we're going to take the time and hear from those other departments and bring their comments forward to you as well. There is no representation in our report from the NVCA, and I think that is something that would be important to bring forward as well. So we will be doing that in February. And I did have an opportunity to sit down with our CAO, George Vaudebancourt, yesterday, and we just went over some of the highlights of the presentation earlier today from the Climate Action Group. And one of the things that we talked about was one of their priorities is the Twin Pad Library facility. And what I'd like to say when it comes to our buildings, and when we're building new buildings in particular, it's not a situation where we're starting at a zero factor for energy efficiency. Over the course of the last 20 years, the building code has grown from a single volume, fairly small regulation into a multi-volume regulation with some very, very specific sections dedicated to climate change mitigation. So, the scrutiny that the design of our Twin Pad library facility went through in terms of meeting the requirements, and it's specifically a section of the building code called SB 10, and it lays out some very, very strict performance that any new building has to meet in terms of its ability to withstand the effects of a changing climate. So going to try to, similar to today's report in terms of establishing that baseline, would like to come back to council in March with a report on that facility, specifically in terms of just establishing what that looks like when a building is designed and constructed under today's regulations, just the level of care and attention that is given to climate change. And, with the hopes that report would establish a really good place to start any communication in terms of what more we could do in terms of our own facilities. So just want to put those things out there for council's consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny, and thank you for the report. I think it really is a great starting spot. Mayor Fulci, I think I saw your request to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Danny. Just to say, when your report comes back, I think it is, and you touched on it, important to point out that there are policies and processes and things that we are already required to follow. But the other piece is an understanding of who does what. We all kind of have to stay in our lane sometimes. And our presenter had mentioned, the SSEA, so the Severn Sound Environmental Association. But what we need to understand is that Severn Sound Environmental Association is in place because they don't have a conservation authority that looks after their environmental needs. We do here in Wasaga Beach. So I think that clarification for people in your report would be helpful as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Mayor, or Deputy Mayor Bray. I just wanted to also, Danny had mentioned that, it's a very active environment we're in. I think what the report shows is staff and councils have been dealing with this for every council going forward. Some people think that, council is just 4 years, but that's a term that we serve. But council itself, the corporation, is an ongoing being. So these things, as was mentioned earlier, we may not have said enough about what we've done in the past, but it has been done. And so when things like the building code change and require better efficiency of heating and windows and everything else, the other thing that happens too is sometimes there are standards that vary. So a few years back, LEED, there was a whole thing about every building should be LEED Platinum or LEED Gold or LEED whatever, the LEED's system. But then, there are other measures that have come in and gone since then. So again, we have to look at the efficiency we can get in every building, being aware that sometimes, kind of the standards will change, or the programs that are used to measure it get modified over time. But again, one of the great things about this report, the thing I look forward to in the next report again, is reminding ourselves and the general public of what staff and council and builders have been doing over the past 20, 30 years as this has become more, and it will become even more important going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Councillor Belanger?
Thank you, Chair Deputy Bray. Danny, thank you very much for your report. I think this is very timely. We've come through a year of some pretty amazing weather events worldwide, and you can hardly turn on the news anymore without hearing about the environment and hearing about climate change. And I do believe that the municipality has a role to play beyond provincial and federal legislation. I think there are opportunities and low-hanging fruit, but particularly on the education side. And your report starts to inform people that we're doing quite a bit in that regard. And I think even more important is how we can assist in educating the general public on the things that they can also do within their own households. And I know there's a lot of different people that touch on that, but we interact with our residents on a regular basis, and that top of mind awareness has been more focused internally as opposed to educating the general public. And I think that's a huge opportunity that we need to really work on and develop. And we have some organizations that have just started up that are very passionate, and I think will be able to assist us if we work together with them. So thanks again for your report.
Thank you, Councillor Belanger. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bray. And Danny touched on it a little bit, but during my years on council and working with the Public Works Department and co-chairing it during this term, we've been talking for years about the weather events that are happening and how Public Works has had to adapt to that, the sizing of culverts, drainage pipes, all those types of things, because the 100-year storm, as it's referred to quite often, seems to be a lot more frequent than 100 years nowadays. We're getting these events, so we've been addressing it and change in our procedures and how we operate with that, which is great to see, and we'll continue to adapt as we go forward. I have noticed lately, and maybe the municipality or treasury could comment or look into it, but I'm seeing calls for corporations, investment funds, banks, and everyone to start putting contingency monies aside, reserve funds, if you will, for these events that, a disaster happens that you may need to have monies available. So there's something to think about, how we might want to go forward, and maybe looking at doing some kind of fund for the municipality. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Seeing no other requests to speak, I will read the motion that the General Government section of Coordinated Committee recommends that Council receive for information this initial report on the current actions being taken by town staff to mitigate the effects of climate change and the ongoing adaptation actions in place in the organization's day-to-day operations that ensure a sustainable future for our residents. If I could have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Foster, Councillor Kinney, all in favor. And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Rogers. So the next item that was pulled was 6.6.3, which was correspondence for information, re a letter of from the City of Sarnia, recatch and release, and this was pulled by Councillor Kinney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I requested it pulled because I'd like Council to consider a modification, and again to our clerk, on the actual information aspect and change it to actually have staff support letters sent. And my reasoning for this, council, is reading the brief letter that we got, it hit several chords within myself. The first one is on face level, catch and release. It's great if you're a fisherman to restock fish population, but it's not a safe environment for a community to have individuals not held accountable for what they've done to society. And generally, individuals that are held to a higher standard, it's not one-offs. It's not that they've done it once. It's repeat offenders. And to have a thought process within our judicial system, which is supposed to be justice, that it makes a community safer by reducing the number of cases they have to handle. I don't see that is the proper solution, Madam Chair. I see that possibly more support for our justice agencies so that they can clear properly the caseload. And secondly, I am going to just give to council a very brief example. In my previous life, we at the Horny West Detachment would see, and I'll give you a crime, break and enter. They would be high in certain times until the good people there find out who has done those break and enters. And statistics have proven that when those individuals are held accountable for a certain amount of time, 6 months, a year, that the actual crime within that section is decreased. So I would like council to consider an amendment to the current one where it goes and further that committee support the recommendation outlined in this letter and request staff to send out a letter in support. Madam Chair, that is my thought process. Thank you.
That would be an amendment to this motion to ask staff to do that. Is there support to second that motion? That amendment to the motion? Seeing Councillor Watson, seeing Councillor Wells. Okay. So can I read it or would you like to modify it, Madam Clerk?
So currently we're voting on the amendment of the motion, and the amendment is to add what Councillor Kinney added and further that committee support the recommendations outlined in this letter and request staff to send out a letter of support. So we'll vote on that motion, that amendment.
So if I could have a mover for that amendment, Councillor Kinney, and a seconder, I think I saw Councillor Watson first. So all in favor of the amendment? So then that passes. So now I will read the
motion as amended.
Okay. All right. So that the General Government Services Section of Coordinated Committee received a letter dated December 16, 2021 from the City of Sarnia for information as amended.
And further that,
the motion that we
committee support
to a letter of support be sent.
Correct.
Okay. And again, mover, please. Councillor Kinney, and seconded by Councillor Foster. All in favor? Thank you. That motion carries unanimously. Okay. The next item on our agenda is item 6.7.1, correspondence requiring action from the town of Flemington, Wyoming. And the motion is that the General Government Services Section of Coordinated Committee received a letter dated November 18th, 2021 from the town of Plymouth, Wyoming for information, and further that committee support the recommendations outlined in this letter and request staff to send out a letter of support. And this has to do with concerns about postponement of the assessment updates from MPAC. If I could have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Kinney, Councillor Wells, all in favor? And that motion carries unanimously. Thank you. The next one is 6.7.2, Collingwood G&M Hospital letter dated January 7th, looking for a letter of support for an MRI unit. And the motion reads that the General Government Services Section of Coordinated Committee received a letter dated January 7th from the Collingwood G&M Hospital for information. And further, that committee support the Collingwood G&M Hospital in their business case proposal and the request staff to send out a letter of support. First off, I guess I see a request to speak from the mayor.
Thank you. I would just say they're not asking for any financial contribution. They're just looking for support at this time. And I believe a letter has been drafted that if supported today can be sent out right away. Thank you.
Right. This letter supports their business case to get the approval for the MRI. Please excuse the background noise. A mover for this, please. Councillor Boulanger, Councillor Foster, and all in favor? And that motion carries unanimously. Thank you. So next on the agenda is item 6.8.1, a motion where notice has previously been given. This is Councillor Boulanger's December 21st notice of motion, read the whistleblower policy. Is there a mover and a seconder for this? Councillor Boulanger, Councillor Kinney, which gets that motion on the table. Is there any request to speak? Mayor Bifulci?
Thank you. I have no problem supporting this today. My only concern with the motion is that it would be unrealistic to think that council or that staff could properly review the matter and bring a report forward this month. I think that there are things already in our policies and that look at this type of thing, but I think that to think that it would come this month would not be a proper timeline for them. So I would look to have that extended to allow them proper review time to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Wells, I believe you were next.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Following up on the mayor's comments, I guess I'm looking at the timeline as well to the council meeting. It's like 2 weeks away for the staff to do an appropriate review, and the reference in the motion is that they refer the Collingwood report to town staff for review and a policy report be brought to council. I would hope that we would be looking at more than just Collingwood. So I happen to have a copy of the Collingwood whistleblower policy, and I'm not going to take exception to it, but I think we need to look at policies from a multitude of municipalities so that we come up with something that is specific to our town and not just copying Collingwood. Again, it's the timeline and the reference to Collingwood only that concern me and that would cause me to say no. Generally, I'm in favor of the motion, but if the councillor, if Councillor Boulanger is willing to postpone the timeline, I'll make an amendment to the timeline. Personally, I would have suggested coordinated committee of February, because that then gives council an opportunity to discuss it at a committee meeting, if need be, and then it can be moved from there to council at the end of the month. To simply move it from now to January at the end at council, generally the discussion of something as important as this takes place at committee first and doesn't just automatically bounce to council. So the long-winded way of saying I don't know if it's considered an amendment. I guess it is an amendment that the reference to the Collingwood policy be removed, and that it be that that staff for review that the refer the Collingwood whistleblower report, rather that it refers to multiple municipality reports that can be gathered, and secondly that the report be brought to council in February at the coordinated committee of February as the earliest, and I would look to the CAO to see if that is a reasonable period of time to have a chance to go through this. It's a very important policy. I don't want to rush it. I'm supportive of it, but I don't want to rush it simply to be, unless Councillor Boulanger can tell me that there's some sense of urgency to this. If Councillor Boulanger can say to me, there's an urgent need to have this done immediately, then I may consider my position differently. But at the moment, I'm not aware of an urgent need to have this policy in place.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Wells. I'm going to follow the order in which the cards went up to gather information before we recommend the amendment, because it sounds like there's a proposed amendment coming to this motion. So next on my list was Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I will support this motion going back to staff, but I also support both Councillor Wells and Mayor Byfolsky's talk of an amendment for the timeline and broadening the scope of it. I do have, as do many residents that have contacted me, significant concerns on how the motion was worded. I see it as an obtuse attempt to cast aspersions upon this council by mentioning and referencing the Collingwood inquiry. The councillor's comment suggesting that Collingwood, if it had such a policy, would have avoided the inquiry's $8.2 million cost is purely speculative in my view. In addition, I quote Ian Adams in his Wasaga Sun article, "The recommendation of a whistleblower policy was raised during the inquiry. Though it was not a final recommendation by the judge overseeing the inquiry, Associate Chief Justice Frank Morocco. Associate Justice Morocco brought forward in his report 306 recommendations relating to best practices in corporate and municipal governance, and a whistleblower policy was not one of them. This might be due to the many pathways already available to staff and the public at the federal, provincial, and municipal levels of government." So that ties in with Councillor Wells that I think we need time to look at a number of policies and give it the appropriate time and consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And again, I had maybe not as eloquently put as George, but I found that paragraph about where it was indicated that had they previously had the policy in place, it likely would have resulted. Well, that's speculative. And it's also, I think it's a little vindictive to our neighbor to bring up an issue in a resolution we have to bring up an issue that costs their taxpayers millions of dollars. So it doesn't add to the equation. You know, we understand that they have a robust whistleblower policy. That's fine. I agree with Councillor Wells. It doesn't mean it's a template for us, but certainly it's something to work from. And I do agree as well. The timing, I think, should go to the next coordinated committee, not directly to council, because I think this is an important piece. And yeah, so I do support it generally, but I just think I'd like the wording tweaked a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Councillor Boulanger.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor Bray. First of all, when I saw the report from Ian Adams, this is an opportunity. We can't foresee the future, but the bottom line is there seemed to be a policy that was well thought out from Collingwood that they felt would protect the municipality from a very expensive inquiry. So having the fact that they have done so much of the work that it certainly should be something that we could consider so we never find ourselves in the same position. As far as the January, when I first put it forward, I guess I'm very flexible on that. In fact, I would like to suggest possibly March coordinated committee, because since we passed this motion and since the article on Collingwood, we have a seasonal resident whose name is Kelly Donovan, who is actually a keynote international speaker on this very topic. And she has expressed to me that she would be interested to make a deputation to council, and I believe that could be arranged for February's coordinated committee meeting. She's quite an expert on the topic. I won't go into all of her background, but she's done an awful lot of work in ensuring that these policies are effective and basically, so I'm hoping that I can have her put in a request for a deputation to the clerk for our February meeting, and then maybe we could look at having it come back to council after our staff review in March. So I would be receptive to that change.
Thank you, Councillor Boulanger. So it does sound like there is full support for making an amendment to this motion. I just wanted to add a couple of comments before we do. And first one, I agreed with everyone that the Collingwood comments were speculative. It was certainly the opinion of a staff member and probably shouldn't be in a motion. In September of 2019, as the vice chair of the Finance and Audit Committee at the County of Simcoe, I had suggested a whistleblower policy for the county. And it went kind of up through the food chain and came back down again where there is in-house legal. And the County of Simcoe in 2020 passed a fraud and wrongdoing policy. So this is certainly, there's lots of examples nearby that we can look at. And I think if we send it back to staff, that they will develop what's right for our community. So the amendments that I understand, sorry, Councillor Wells, did you want to speak?
I was just prepared to say that I would be prepared to move a motion or move an amendment. And I tend to agree with people talking about the second paragraph. That's one staff member's and Ian Adams' opinion. I would like to see the second paragraph removed completely so that the whole motion refers just to the whistleblower policy and a need at the town. And secondly, that the fourth paragraph be sent to town staff for review, and that a report be brought to Wasaga Beach Council in March, following Councillor Boulanger's acceptance, that be brought to coordinated committee in March for council's consideration. I would like to see those two amendments made.
Okay, and Mr. CAO, I saw your card too.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A conversation with the manager of human resources with respect to policies pertaining to human resources that she's working on, and she has a couple that are being driven by legislative amendments that the province recently enacted. So the suggestion that a March timeframe is what she was asking for, as opposed to January, February. So from a staff perspective, that would fit within her priority list. Thank you.
Okay. So, Madam Clerk, would you like to read the amendment, or would you like me? I think I know what I'm doing.
I'll let you give it a shot. If you need assistance, you can just let me know.
Okay. So whereas the town of Collingwood has recently approved a robust whistleblower policy on October 18, 2021, and whereas in recent years, many municipalities have adopted whistleblower policies to safeguard the best interest of the municipality, the taxpayer, and town staff, be it resolved that council refer to staff the request for a whistleblower report to come back to coordinated committee in March for review of council.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bray. And that is the motion as amended, correct?
That would be the amendment, yes. Or as amended, yes.
That's as amended. So the amendment, if we want to vote on the amendment of the motion, the amendment is that we remove paragraph 2 and strike out January and add March to the last paragraph.
Okay, so a mover and a seconder for the amendment, please. Councillor Boulanger and Councillor Watson, all in favor? So that passes. Opposed, if any?
There were requests to speak before you called the vote.
Okay, I didn't see that, but I'm also noticing that Councillor Kinney is frozen on my screen, so I'm not getting a vote from. Okay, now he's moving. Okay, life is good. Sorry, the request to speak came from Councillor Wells.
Just a minor point that the way it was referred to by the by the clerk was that it continued to say refer the Collingwood report to staff, and that too is something that my recommendation is that be removed, and that it simply be that resolve the council refer the issue of a whistleblower report to town staff for review, and leave it at that, and leave out the Collingwood. They certainly will look at Collingwood's, but they will also look to other municipalities as well.
Thank you. Mr. CAO, I saw your request to speak, I think.
Thank you, Madam
Deputy Mayor. Councillor Watson also did. Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Watson had his card.
Councillor Watson.
Thank you. Councillor Wells already addressed what I was going to, that we needed to change that thing about being specific to Collingwood and broaden it. Thank you.
Okay, so the amendments are to remove paragraph 2, to remove the reference to Collingwood in paragraph 4, and to change the date to March 2022 for coordinated committee, not council. Those are the amendments that we're voting on. All in favor? Oh, sorry, mover. It was Councillor Belanger. Seconder was Councillor Wells. All in favor. So that carries unanimously. Now we will vote on the original motion as amended. Do we need to read the entire motion, or can I just, yes, okay. Whereas the Town of Collingwood Council has recently approved a robust whistleblower policy on October 18th, 2021, and whereas it was indicated that they had previously had the policy in place, it would have very likely resulted in the town. Yeah.
That paragraph would have been stricken from this motion.
But I thought I'm supposed to say as amended.
No, you would read as the motion as we have amended it. So without paragraph 2 and without the word Collingwood and changing January to March. That's how you would read it. Would you like me to?
No, I can do it. I just thought that was different to know how we would normally be handling it. So I will start again. Whereas the Town of Collingwood Council has recently approved a robust whistleblower policy on October 18th, 2021, and whereas in recent years, many municipalities have adopted whistleblower policies to safeguard the best interest of the municipality, taxpayer, and town staff, be it resolved that Council refer a request for a whistleblower report to town staff to be brought back to Wasaga Beach Coordinated Committee in March 2022 for Council's consideration. So it's no longer as amended, correct? Because that's the new motion.
That's correct, because we passed an amending motion.
Okay. All in favor? I need a mover, sorry. Councillor Belanger, and a seconder, Councillor Wells. All in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you. And moving on, the next item on our agenda is a COVID-19 update, and I will pass that over to CAO, Mr. Vadaboncourt.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bray. So the command team will provide a COVID update this morning to members of Coordinated Committee. Today I'm joined by our Communications Coordinator, Michael Jennings, and I believe Craig Williams, our Deputy Fire Chief, will be joining us, although he is subbing for me on the conference call with the Chief Medical Officer of Health. So if he's able to join us, he will. If not, then I will substitute for him. So, oh, there he is. So, Madam Chair, I think we could start with Mr. Jennings.
Thank you, George. I'll just start by touching briefly on the provincial numbers. They're reporting 410 COVID patients in Ontario ICUs, and that testing has captured 9,900 in new cases. The other point I wanted to mention was modified stage 2 regulations began back on January 5. Most people know what that means at this point, so I won't cover those details. I did want to point out that another piece of news we just recently learned was elementary students and high school students will be returning to class, in-class learning January 17th. And yesterday, the province announced the launch of school-based vaccine clinics for youth and staff, and that public health will be handling this. And further details will be coming next week, the province says. They also announced that rapid antigen tests for students and staff will be provided in schools, and the use of these tests will be for symptomatic individuals. January 11th, there was a press conference with the Minister of Health, and she announced that Ontario will be deploying internationally educated nurses to hospitals, as well as other healthcare settings in need of staffing support. And she noted that more than 1,200 applicants have expressed interest in this. And so this is being done to help the system, which is certainly struggling. And the last little point that I wanted to reveal is government polling shows that Ontarians are frustrated by the province's handling of COVID-19. And so that's something that the province is certainly aware of in the decisions that are being made. And that concludes my provincial report.
Perfect. Good morning, members of council. As you know, there have been a number of changes, significant changes in the provincial testing strategy, which has caused a number of our typical case counts to become a little bit less reliable than they once were, and it's more difficult for us to determine actual community spread. With that said, I do provide the following update, which is an accurate reflection of the information that we have to date. Provincially, there have been over 906,000 laboratory confirmed COVID-19 cases in the province, including 10,445 deaths. There are now 505 patients in the ICUs across the province due to COVID-19, including 265 on ventilators. Of the ICU admissions, 50% of these individuals are either unvaccinated or partially vaccinated. The provincial testing positivity rate is 20.3%, and to date, 82.6% of the population is partially vaccinated, while 77.3% is partially vaccinated. Within Simcoe-Muskoka region, the total number of confirmed laboratory cases has increased to 26,700 and now includes 296 deaths. Currently, 98% of all confirmed laboratory cases are coming back as the Omicron variant. There are 31 individuals hospitalized in Simcoe County. The 7-day moving average of COVID-19 cases across Simcoe-Muskoka is 415 cases per day. This indicator is certainly low to what the actual community case count would be. The percent positivity within our region is 21.8%, and there are now 85 identified active outbreaks across the region, including 42 institution settings, 38 congregate living settings, and 5 education settings. And not surprisingly, this is the largest number of outbreaks that Simcoe-Muskoka has experienced since the beginning of the pandemic. 86% of residents in Simcoe-Muskoka over 12 years old are now fully or partially vaccinated. At this point, I would normally be able to give a breakdown of both cases and hospitalizations for Wasaga Beach specifically. Unfortunately, the health unit has stopped publishing these details because they are no longer able to provide reliable information at this level due to the changes in the provincial testing strategy. So I won't be able to provide any additional information at this time. However, if this information comes back online in the future, I will be adding it to future updates. And Chair, this concludes my update.
Thank you, Deputy Fire Chief. Back to you, Mr. CAO.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the changes the changes the province has imposed under the modified stage 2 will be in effect until at least January 26th. It is estimated that the infections caused by the Omicron variant will peak sometime in February. Some of the measures that the province has put in place impact services delivered by the municipality. These include, we have closed indoor recreation spaces, including the Recplex, Prime Time Club, Youth Center, YMCA, and Arena. The library is limited to 50% capacity. Outdoor rink is limited to 50% capacity. Capacity for organized indoor public events is limited to 5 people, and the closure of indoor meeting and event spaces with limited exceptions. Other than what has been mentioned, all other town facilities remain open to provide service to the public. With the current situation, staff have taken the following action. We've reminded staff of the importance of mask wearing in all locations outside of their workspace and following proper public health protocols. We've implemented new isolation requirements to return to work protocols for staff that catch or are exposed to the virus. We've implemented flexible work arrangements to assist staff with childcare issues during at-home learning experience. We've altered staff shifts so that staff are now working straight days at our facilities, with the exception of Tuesdays when the vaccination clinic is in operation at the Recplex. Current vacant facility positions are not being filled. Interviews are being held, but staff start dates have been delayed. Some arena staff have been assigned to the Recplex. All facility staff are focusing on building maintenance activities at various town buildings. The front counter at the Recplex is open during regular business hours, with the exception of Tuesday nights, when the hours will correspond with the vaccination clinics. Finally, in-person recreation programs have been canceled, and the recreation department is reverting to online programming only. Outdoor activities are being encouraged. The Omicron virus is more contagious, and with new isolation requirements, the command team has anticipated a greater number of absences. As I said, this is expected to last 4 to 6 weeks. We currently have 4 employees isolating due to symptoms. I think that may have just increased by 2 today, so we have 6. And due to symptoms, positive test results, or contact with positive household members. The maximum number of employees isolating on the same day was 16 during the first week of January, and that was just for a couple of days. Where possible and appropriate, employees in isolation have continued to work remotely. Department heads refreshed their business continuity plans developed in 2020 to ensure the continued delivery of critical services, such as emergency services, water treatment and distribution, snow plowing, IT, building, planning, and treasury services. Wasaga Distribution, the Ontario Clean Water Agency, Haroni Alarms, and other service providers have confirmed their staffing contingency plans. We are confident that we are well prepared to handle the anticipated staff shortages in the coming weeks and continue to deliver services that the public expect. In closing, I would like to thank staff that stepped up and filled extra shifts for a couple of days during the first week of January while we dealt with increased isolation absenteeism. Public Works was particularly short-staffed during that period. Madam Chair, that concludes my comments, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Belanger.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bray. Not so much a question of what's been discussed so far, but with the new variant and the level of transmission, and I'm hearing quite a bit on the news that given the number of positive tests and that it's very likely that there's it's like an iceberg where there's a lot of people non-symptomatic that are among us that are affected. And it looks like they're recommending a higher quality of mask than what we have been using for quite a period of time. And my understanding is the availability of those masks is a little better. So I didn't know if the provincial funding would allow us to look at providing some of those masks to some of our most I guess, challenged residents that like maybe clients of the food bank and that type of thing that may not have the financial ability or the transportation to get their hands on those masks, whether or not we should look at, as a municipality, making a purchase and doing some distribution. And hopefully that could be covered by some of the government funding. So that was a comment. I don't know what anyone has any thoughts on that.
CAO, or sorry, I just saw the deputy chief's hand go up.
Yes, I was going to refer that to our deputy chief. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to Councillor Blanger. I have done a little bit of research recently through the health unit as well as through the province on what their recommendations are for mask use. And their direction hasn't specifically changed in the general public. However, there certainly is increased need for an N95 mask or respiratory in a healthcare setting. And I can speak specifically to our staff. Firefighters do have access to the N95 mask. And for other staff, we make sure they have access to a well-fitted surgical mask if they need. Specifically to the public, you are correct, Councillor Blanger. Access to masks has dramatically increased in the last 2 years. It wouldn't be for me to suggest, that's how the budget be spent. But if that's the direction, I'd be happy to do some more research to determine what the most appropriate face covering would be and some potential options for distribution.
Councillor Belanger, follow up?
Yeah, just to add, and I'm not suggesting one is right and one is wrong, but certainly our neighbors to the south in the U.S. are embarking upon a project to put a higher level of masks to every household in the U.S. So I just think it's something that we need to keep an eye on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Byfolchi.
Thank you. I was just going to suggest that maybe the discussion can be flipped over to the COVID command team and they can have a discussion there. My concern is if we start to pick and choose who in the community we're going to give a more superior mask to, I don't want to get into that as well. So I think that there needs to be further discussion as to what that would look like, because I think everyone could argue in different scenarios that they need a certain thing. So again, I think it should go to the COVID command team and that group can discuss it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We'll take that back and review.
Great. Seeing no more comments or questions, I will read the motion once my iPad comes back online. That the General Government Services section of Coordinated Committee received the January 13th, 2022 verbal COVID-19 update from the CAO for information. If I could have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Wells, Councillor Watson, all in favor? And that motion carries unanimously. So the next item on the agenda is the closed session. Is there a need to go into closed session? I had a couple of questions, so I don't know if everybody else had all their, and I just didn't get time to ask them ahead of time. So if you would indulge me, I would like to go into closed session. Okay, so then resolved that pursuant to section 239(2)(a) of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended, the next portion of the January 13th, 2022 Coordinated Committee meeting will move into closed session to discuss the security of the property of the municipality or local board. If I could get a mover and a seconder. Councillor Foster, Councillor Kinney, all in favor? Thank you. So I'll give the clerk a minute to confirm that we are in fact in closed
And we're live, Deputy Mayor Bray.
Thank you. Welcome back to the General Government Services section of Coordinated Committee. We have a report from closed session, which is 8.1, the CAO's report dated January 13th, 2022. Resolved that the General Government Services section of Coordinated Committee received the information and confirmed the direction provided to the CAO in closed session pertaining to a lease matter. If I could have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Kinney, Councillor Wells, all in favor? That motion carries unanimously. And then finally, the CAO's report dated January 13th, 2022, Ria Beachfront lease for 50 Mosley Street. The General Government Services section of Coordinated Committee recommend to Council that it approve a lease for 50 Mosley Street for the period February 1st, 2022 to September 30th, 2022, based on the town's standard lease with minor amendments as noted. Again, if I could have a mover, Councillor Foster, and a seconder, Councillor Kinney, all in favor? And that motion carries unanimously. And with that, this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.